Welcome back to another session. I hope you're well. Before I begin today's session, I'd like to invite you to, for those who haven't subscribed already, to subscribe. I would also welcome the opportunity to hear from you if you believe that what I am sharing is different to what you, I guess, your philosophy of life. If you disagree, express your disagreement through the commentary section of the video. Leave a comment. If you dislike what you hear, hit the dislike button. If you like what you hear, hit the like button. I know there are a lot of people who are ninja watchers and do not participate either through the subscription process or by comments. I'd like to invite all of you to join the channel and participate more intently. Now, in today's session, I'd like to speak about a topic that I have covered in several sessions over the many years. Fundamentally, I am going to try and bring together something that I started to talk about a few years ago. This is not an original concept of mine. I have just found a way to put it into words and numbers in a way that perhaps is more useful for myself. The concepts go back hundreds and hundreds of years. It was simply expressed in a different way. But there is still consistency between what was said then and what I am saying now. And I believe there will be consistency between what I say today and what people in the future express in their own words and in whatever analogy they choose to use. One of the things that I was looking at earlier today was some data, some information. Let me see if I can find it. That was available on the website, the Office of National Statistics. And I was drawn to, if you bear with me for a second, I was drawn to a particular section that dealt with parts of our life that I guess require some extra time and attention. And in the Office of National Statistics, there was a section that dealt with people's general well-being. And it talked about how many people found life to be satisfying and how many people found life to be slightly dissatisfying. How many people who feel they are less happy than they were a year ago or a decade ago or 2 decades ago. But he also went on to talk about several other things, such as the level of dependency we as a society currently have towards antidepressant medication. And this number is absolutely beyond belief. It's growing at a pace that is unbelievable. What I'd like to do is perhaps just take a section of what I observed, and I'm going to juxtapose it with relationships, and I will explain my reasons. Now, when I looked at the data, what struck me the most was that we are in society today, we are the most free compared to our ancestors, the UK specifically. We are much more wealthier. We are much more free. We have an abundance of choices. We have more freedoms, both in every single area of life. Sexually, more sexually liberated. We're more spiritually and religiously liberated. We're more mentally liberated. We can choose whatever path we wish and whatever life we want to lead. However, the data suggests that we are also amongst the most unhappy we've ever been. Now, I find it fascinating. How can it be that we've civilized the world? And if you understand Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the bottom you have the physiological needs, and then security and safety, and above that, love and belonging. self-esteem, and then self-actualization. We'll solve the safety or the physiological needs section. We no longer have issues to do with safety. In the main, we don't have wars every decade. We don't have wars across borders and within borders in the general. So physiologically, we are where we want to be with regards to safety and security. We are where we want to be. Therefore, one would expect that we should be thriving and happy in a blissful state, recognizing that there are only three parts of that hierarchy that are left: love and belonging, self-esteem, and self-actualization. And what we have, unfortunately, is the reverse. We are the most unhappy, despite being the safest, having our physiological needs met. We are more distant than our forefathers were, for some reason. And what I found is I looked through the data, I realized that where we were failing miserably was in love and relationships. Now this brings me dovetails to what we are going to be talking about today and the impact of relationships on our well-being and on our happiness. It plays a huge role. Now psychologists, psychiatrists, behavioral scientists, sociologists, those who study human behavior have come up and have a conclusive consensus. And some people say 85%, some people say 80% and above of our happiness will come from our meaningful relationships. However, what we have failed to understand is between, say, 7 years old and 18, what we consider as meaningful relationships start to morph into something different. From 18 and above, we become adults, so we bond with our peer group. We leave family behind. We join into a peer group between 18 and 25, sometimes even going up to 27. We form associations and networks and inner circles and outer circles with new people. As we approach 30, our expectations of life, our desires, our goals, our dreams, our experiences, our pursuits take us into a different path. Our friends and those who were part of our peer group start to forge different pathways. Some travel abroad, some travel across within the same nation, some get married, some pursue career paths that take them away from the inner group and that geographical location. Therefore, we are stuck. In any case, what is very interesting is at that particular time in life, you should be, all things remaining equal, forging a new family, a familial pathway, forming new associations. And one way to do that is by your significant relationships, whether that be legalized or non-legalized but still recognized, something official, whether that be through a faith-based approach, through the state, or something else. But whether you're a civil partnership, marriage, cohabitation, or just dating, intimately dating, that starts to take a life of its own. You start to form and forge a new experience, a new relationship that would then be like a seed you plant in the soil, and it produces much fruit if you water and nurture and care for that soil. That's where we're failing. What we're seeing is that from about 18, people who are registered as being heavily dependent on antidepressants have been increasing. As a matter of fact, the age has started from 16 and 15 and 14. What we are finding is that we're doing very poorly with love and relationships, and therefore that affects everything else. So, as I thought about this, I was thinking about a way of providing an explanation and a solution. Now, my solution and my explanation will not be crisp, so you have to forgive me. Eat the meat and spit out the bones. If this is not for you, that's perfectly okay. But focus on the message. Focus on the key parts of the message that is for you. Not everything is for you. Don't get caught in the delivery, in the mannerism, in the presentation, in the editorial approach. Just stay focused on the key part of what is important. I should say very, very, very clearly, what I share in the next few minutes will be very hard-hitting for those who are opposed to hearing the truth in whatever form it comes in. I offer no apologies. If you are a snowflake, this is the right time to exit stage left. Find some other channel that reaffirms and reinforces your pre-existing view of life. On the other hand, if you're looking for answers and if you're looking to make changes, long-term changes based on the outcomes you want, I think you might find this interesting. And let me get started. I'm going to talk about the value hierarchy. But the value hierarchy in the sexual marketplace or in dating, and under the umbrella of intersexual dynamics. What is the value hierarchy? And let me use a concept that I think will be understandable. Everybody is familiar with living in a house. You're familiar with the fact that a house has several parts. There's a foundation upon which the building is built. You have walls, you have doors, you have ceilings, you have, depending on where you live, you have interesting interior designs, cornices, you have skirting boards. All of that comes together to form a building. A building has a value. Its value is not always fixed. It changes across time and across seasons for several reasons. I won't go into the detail, but I'll address a few. To someone who is standing outside of a building, observing the building, they have to put together two concepts: narratives and then hardcore numbers. Valuation is therefore the bridge that connects both concepts: numbers, narratives, stories, and numbers. Therefore, just like buildings, human beings have an inherent value. That inherent value is connected to the narrative, the story behind the person, their lived experiences, their future dreams, their goals, their aspirations, their challenges, their traumas, their struggles, what they have overcome. The list goes on. All of those are narratives. And when I meet you, or when you meet me, as I share much more about myself, suddenly you're connected with the story behind my journey. And suddenly you assign, based on my lived experience and based on the geography, perhaps where we meet each other or where I have come from, based on my struggles, based on my ancestry lineage, you assign a level in your head subconsciously as to what you perceive me to be. A piece of shit. You might perceive me to be quite remarkable. You might perceive me to just be average. That is a hierarchy. You're assigning me into, based on a value system, based on what you consider to be your internal hierarchical premise. You may not be very vocal, but think about your friends. There are some friends that you have that if I were to come up to you and I asked you to think about your friends, and I've done this so many times with people that I have met over the years, and I said, of all of your friends, if I made two proposals to you, the first being, you were going to go long, in other words, you were going to bet on the person, and let's say I gave you £100,000 or £1 million, and you were going to put a bet, place that on the person, and the premise was who would do well over time. One person in your friends and inner circle that you knew that you would happily put £1 million, £1,000, £100,000 on the person's future success. Who would they be? Second question, of all of the groups you have, people around you, those who are supposed to be your friends, who would you actually go short? In other words, who would you bet against? The fact that they may not amount to anything, or they may not fulfill their potential. And I always receive answers. What you've identified, usually, the person, in this case, is someone who, based on what they've observed, not based on their intelligence, not based on their hard work, not based on their connectivity, but what I found they had to be based normally on character, some traits that the people had that led the person being asked to consider such that they would say, well, she's a person of integrity. She's kind. She's hardworking. She's very forgiving. She's quite open. These are traits that guarantee or has led the person to believe that that other person will be successful. Similarly, the person that they choose to bet against, there are traits that would enable that person judging to say, well, he comes from a great family. He has good education, but there's just something about him not being honest. He's a very dishonest person. And I can see him going into activities and transactions and not doing right by his partners. Character, therefore, your personal traits, becomes part of what we use as the narrative to assign a value. So what you've seen here is that assign someone a high value and someone a low value. Narratives and numbers. The value hierarchy applies to everything we do. There's a pair of shoes in your closet that is more valuable to you. You might wear that shoes, those trainers, to the gym, and the other one, perhaps you might wear it to go out on a more sociable occasion. There's a hierarchy system. Now, we're human beings, and in dating, the same thing applies. Now, let me address a few things first before I get into the detail. Number one, human beings, from my experience and from my perspective, we occupy what I call 3 levels of understanding. There are 3 parts to our personality: spiritual, mental, or intellectual, and physical. We are spiritual beings. We live in a physical body, and we've been gifted with an intellect. And how we use our intellectual faculties determine our emotional state and the life we experience, the emotions we have. So you have, in many ways, spiritual, metaphysical, mental, intellect, and physical. On the spiritual level, we're all equal. No one is greater than you, no one is less than you. Superiority and inferiority, as I was told as a young child, are opposite sides of an inferior coin. I don't believe I am superior to anyone. I don't believe anyone is inferior to me at the spiritual level. On the mental level, on the intellect level, we have equality. We're equal. You have a mind, you have an intellect. You've been given the same ability to use your 6 intellectual faculties: memory, imagination, will, perception, intuition, and focus. We all have that. So we have all the same intellectual faculties. We have a mind. We can use the same ability if we train ourselves on how to use our intellectual faculties to create any world we want. We've been given this kingdom of hell and this kingdom of heaven in our intellect. We just choose to exercise the power. On the physical level, that's where we start to have separations. Some person is born able-bodied and someone else is born disabled. There is no equality. Someone is actually born to a wealthy family, someone else is born to a poor family. There is no equality. So we do not have equality on the physical plane. However, here's the key part of what I'm going to say. As a person, as an individual, the way you place yourself in a hierarchy evolves depending on whether you are just one, amongst many, amongst the family, amongst the community, amongst the nation. So what we've done to ensure and with the hope that no one is left behind, we've come up with a system where we simply say, well, we're equal under the law so that no one person is left behind. We have equality of rights. We want to have equality of opportunities, and we generally do in the UK. But there is inequality of outcomes. Now, keep those three parts of what I've explained: spiritual, physical, and intellectual. What you see here is that there's an objective way and there's a subjective way to valuation. Now, this is a very, 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 very touchy subject, because I'm not talking about valuing a building or a stock or a bond or derivatives. I'm not talking about valuing a piece of chair or furniture. I'm talking about human beings. And here I am speaking about assigning a value to a human being. Most people do not accept that, because it goes against our natural instinct to say, no, every human being is of infinite value. Now, if you are one of those who believes that, I have to say, well, there's a place for you. Ignorance is not knowing something. I am an ignorant man. There's so many things I do not know. Stupid is refusing to learn, despite the information being available. In other words, you're rejecting knowledge. Human beings do not have an infinite value. We do not. As a matter of fact, if you go into theology, we know the value across three theological philosophies: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. There was a price paid. There was a value exchange, a life for a life. Died one person. If you hurt someone, that is the value of the price you pay, another life. We also know, some of the scholars say that as a result of love, one life was exchanged for the rest. In other words, there's a value there. It's not infinite. And if you do not accept that the whole concept of infinity is not something we can comprehend in the human plane of understanding, you would struggle with what I'm sharing, because your natural instinct, especially if you were raised in a modern West, is to believe in this utopian world. Now, I believe in the tragic view of reality, not because there is something negative about that perspective, but because we are an extension of the animal kingdom. And all you have to do is look around you to see that there is no necessarily equality in anything in life. There are parts of the world where they have the most earthquakes, the most hurricanes. Some places have the most, you might say, flooding. Other parts have the best trees. Other parts actually have more natural resources. Other parts actually have more intellectual minds. There is no equality anywhere. Now, let me park to the side everything I've shared so far, because I have gone on for a bit. And in the few minutes I have, let me bring together a conversation that I will continue, not just in today's session, but I will expand on what I have shared previously. As a person, in our nation, in Great Britain, in the United Kingdom, in England, your value is accepted as an individual. Into your family associates a value to you that could be infinite. So you might be of infinite value to your loved ones and your friends. To the nation or to your community, your value extends maybe towards the whole hope of infinity. That's your community. To the nation, we're all valuable. As a matter of fact, here is a fascinating one. As a result of the pandemic we had, when the government came up with, in collaboration and in partnership with the pharmaceutical and the biotech industries, and they came up with a vaccination, the government itself made a pledge that if someone was actually harmed as a result of taking the vaccine, that there will be a compensation should they lose their life. The government itself assigned a value to your life. Now, I say that so you can understand. Don't get edgy about what I'm sharing. Just understand the spirit. I've talked about the person. I've talked about the family. I have talked about the nation. I'm going to deviate and talk about something else that I call the marketplace. Now, this is where today's session really begins. I'm going to very briefly talk about concepts, and I hope you take these concepts for what they are. The marketplace is where people transact. I grew up going to marketplaces. I love marketplaces. You walk there and you exchange energies, you exchange words, you negotiate, you trade, you batter, and you come to a conclusion. Both parties walk away. Fair exchange is not considered robbery. And both parties come in good faith. Some people come with ulterior motives, but generally speaking, if you're doing a one-time transaction, your motivations are very different to if you're doing a regular transaction coming back to the same place. So what you find is that you build a relationship with people you meet in the marketplace with the hope that when you return next week to shop, you meet with favor. When you come back the next month, you meet with favor. But if you are walking in for the first time, it's not unusual to find that you have people who are swindlers and people who do negative and bad deals. The marketplace, when it comes to relationship, exists. It's not a physical place. It's both a physical and an, you might say, an online experience. It's even mental. In the marketplace, there's two parts to the marketplace. I talk about this in my sessions. The first being the dating marketplace. The second being the relationship marketplace. Your value as a woman, your value as a man, will be determined not by you, not by your father, not by your mother, not by your friends, not by the politically correct perspective, not in a subjective way. Your value is determined, generally objectively, by the marketplace. I walk into a marketplace and I want something. There has to be a value exchange. Now, this brings me full circle back to the concept of valuation. Value is what you get. The price is what has been advertised for what it will sell for. The cost generally comes in two parts, whether that be capital expenditure or operating expenditure. I buy a house, the house is listed for £100,000, that's the price. However, I may have estimated my calculation using the narratives and the numbers, using all the knowledge I could acquire, and I might come to the conclusion that that property is worth £150 in value. That could be simply based on the free cash flow that property would generate over its entire lifetime. So if I exchange 100,000 money today, I'm exchanging that in hope that I will get 150,000 over the lifetime of the property. So there's a positive net present value in that transaction for me. The one thing I haven't included is the cost. There will be transaction costs, there'll be closing costs, there'll be operating costs, which usually is incorporated in my valuation. Done properly, the present value of the future cash flow would incorporate my my operating cost. However, there could be capital expenditure that I have to invest to bring the property up to standard to be able to generate that income from rental or whatever. So I have to calculate and estimate transaction cost, refurbishment cost, improvement cost, tax expenditure, all of that. And when I add all of those costs to the price, that becomes my total purchase price. If my total purchase price comes to say £120,000, but my valuation is still £150,000, then I have a net present value of £30,000. I have an NPV greater than 1. And anyone who understands finance will know whenever the NPV is equal to 0 or greater than 1, it means you're earning your cost of capital or you're earning your hurdle rate. Put that aside. Technical content. The point being price, value, cost. Men are cost benefit calculators. And when we meet a woman, we're doing those calculations in our head. We don't do it very, very scientifically always, but we're using cues, heuristics, to come up with a calculation in our head as to whether we think your value is worth the price you want or the cost is deserving of the net present value from being in a relationship with you. We do that calculation very fast. So for example, let me use a good example. I walk into a restaurant. I'm a single man, for example. I walk into a restaurant and I see women. The first one I interact with is dressed beautifully well, very stylishly. The second one is also dressed beautifully well, equally just as attractive. From the physical appearance, I cannot determine immediately, just on their looks, assuming they have the same relative ranking or value, I cannot determine until I interact with them further whether one will have too much of a cost and the other will have less. I have to speak with them and interact with them. And it could be I find out one is very high maintenance. This is the same as a building that requires very high capital expenditure to start with and high operating expenditure. You know, she has to do her nails, everything has to be done every single week. And if she's expecting me to be in the relationship with her and provide all that support, then I have to calculate the cost to me. Now, her beauty has a price. So I have to estimate whether, okay, am I in the dating marketplace or am I looking for something long term? If I'm looking for something short term, which is the dating marketplace, then I don't really mind because it's a short term expenditure to get what I want and to give her what she wants. But for long term, I might decide I cannot afford to have her as a significant other because she's too high maintenance. Men do this very quickly. Now, we establish that difference from our interactions with you. So, coming back to the dating marketplace, the marketplace comes in two parts: dating, relationships. However, here's a key part. Everybody in the marketplace, whether they know or they do not know, already subscribes to an ideology, a traditional ideology or a modern ideology. If you live in Britain or the United Kingdom, as a matter of fact, if you live in any part of the Anglosphere, Canada, the United States, Australia, Great Britain, you will find actually, in most cases, if you are 65, 67, the baby boom generation or younger, you will find you already, by default, may not realize how you have been subscribed to the modern approach to dating and relationships. Most people who come from other parts of the world, whether that be the Oriental areas or the East or other parts of the continent, generally subscribe to a traditional approach to relationships and dating. So the things we once had in the UK, which were great, chivalry, being a gentleman, chastity, decorum, are out the window now as a matter of preference, liberation. So what you find is people are looking for the benefits. They still want to hold on to the traditional benefits of dating and relationships, but they don't want any of the responsibilities. They want the freedom. They want the full expression. They want to be liberated, so they hold on to the modern approach whilst holding on to the traditional approach and the benefit it brings. All benefit, no responsibility, no accountability. Now, the reason I explain that is simple. Usually, when a man meets a woman, very quickly, he either establishes very fast what camp she falls into. Now, even if he doesn't do it very fast, he does that over time as the relationship blossoms or as the interaction proceeds. A woman meets a man and does the same calculation. Most people, generally, are unable to do this calculation. So we go based on different cues and heuristics and perhaps things we've been conditioned to look for from our peer group, from our families, or from our society. Men rank women when we meet you. You know, the idea that I've seen people, I've heard of people getting into their feelings from what I've shared about ranking and what I've shared about value and sexual marketplace value, and I'm stunned at how naive a lot of people can be without understanding that sometimes what I'm expressing in words and numbers is what people do subconsciously without realizing. I'll go into that in more detail. The marketplace exists. Although there's a dating marketplace and a relationship marketplace, sometimes it's the same place, except for those who are dating with intention. Otherwise, it's like walking into a pub. A few young men walk into a pub, and in the pub there are a few young women. Some of those women are looking for just fun for one night. Some may be looking for fun for 2 months. Some may actually have got to a stage where they say, listen, I'm done with the fun. I want something serious and significant. They are all in the same place, different expectations. The difference between each woman and each man is intention. What are you dating for? Are you dating with the intent to have fun? Or are you dating specifically with the intent to be married? That then puts you in two categories. Now here's what's interesting. The valuation process, the value process, you're still judged in a similar manner. Now this brings me to how we rank women as men. I should also say, this is the same way the men are ranked by women. However, in other words, the ranking approach is the same. Your value is judged in the same manner, but we focus on different variables. A man looks at something different, a woman looks at something different. However, another however, those who are from the modern West disagree that one sex can use a different metric and another sex is left with using a different metric. They usually think, especially women, that it should be equal, that we are equal as human beings, and therefore our selection process should be the same. And this is where we fail. And the women's movement and the W movement and the F movement have done a disservice to young women. So much so that what we're finding, coming back to the Office of National Statistics, the women are the more social of the group. They are the ones who actually find it interesting to get to a certain period of their lives and realize that they need a family, they need a community, they need an inner circle. Unfortunately, we have raised over the past 40 years and more, we have raised women to be like men. We've raised 3 generations of harder women and softer men. So what you find is that when men express the fact that there is a ranking amongst men, women say nothing about that. They say, yes, there is a ranking. But when men say there is also a ranking amongst women, women cry foul. Again, they want all the benefits, none of the responsibilities. You see, with great power and with freedom comes responsibility. Women, you ask for this. A liberated sexual marketplace, freedom, the power to choose, and the removal of all forms of shame. This is the world you get. So, from a ranking perspective, there are 4 criteria that I use, that I refer to in my videos. Number 1 is SMV, Sexual Marketplace Value. Not my concept. This dates back many, many, many years. NSMV, your non-sexual marketplace value. Your RFE, your reproductive fertility value. Your EIV, your economic intrinsic value. Now, the 3 concepts or acronyms are mine, as my way of trying to explain concepts that I perhaps knew to be existing but couldn't define it properly. And let me go through each of them. Your sexual marketplace value simply means that in the sexual marketplace, whether that be the relationship or whether that be the dating marketplace, you have a value. From a 0 to 10 in ranking, you're scored based on your appearance. Effectively, it's very visual. How attractive you are, how beautiful you are. Height to waist ratio, height to weight ratio. I think there's a Fibonacci sequence and ratio is a useful guide in the West, but in other parts of the world, every single culture has a way of determining what they consider to be the most beautiful. Eyebrows, eye color, nose shape, space in between your nose and your mouth, chin, hair, all of these are used as guidelines. And anyone who has been on a beauty runway understands this. Now, I'll talk about this in more detail. But the key thing is, if you line 10 people, they all have a number. Both men and women. From a beauty and attractiveness perspective, physical. There are men who are slightly more attractive than men who are a lot more attractive. Most people fall within the normal. Like a bell curve, the normal distribution, you have about, for most people, 60-70% of people fall within the normal. Most people are average. Now, lest you think this is me sitting on my chair, passing judgment, I fall within the average group as well. Most people are average. And there is a small select group of people who are exceptionally good looking, great physiques, natural physiques. Now, I'm not talking about physiques that you've created or reconstructed or built yourself. Talk about natural looks. And there are some who, unfortunately, didn't win the genetic lottery. They're not as attractive as the normal or the most attractive. That is your SMV. And I'll go into detail about what this consists of. But at the core, for women, from a man's judgment perspective, youth, beauty. Now this brings me to the next, which is your RFV, your reproductive fertility value. Nature has a very cruel approach to how it deals with its creation. At some point in time, the gates start to shut. Nature says, make your decisions quickly. You don't have infinite time. There is a window, a time window. And once you exceed that time window, what you find is your ability to reproduce as a man or as a woman drops precipitously. It drops significantly. At 18, now here's a key difference. At 18, a woman is born with a fixed quantity of eggs. And over time, the quality of eggs deteriorates and the quantity deteriorates. That's a biological fact. So when we talk about value, we're simply saying the younger you are, the more value you have from a reproductive perspective, all things remaining equal and for the majority. But as you approach that gate, when the gate shuts, you find actually you get to what we call, or what the medical profession calls, geriatric pregnancy, high-risk pregnancy. And as you continue, you find you get to a point where you cannot reproduce as successfully as a woman who is much younger. The sexual marketplace value and the reproductive fertility value are the two proxies most men use. We use a heuristic to choose age. 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, we say the most fertile. The concept of the virgin's price, youth, beauty, chastity, decorum, purity, are used as proxies. As a woman approaches 30, 35, 40, society over time, even in other parts of the animal kingdom, generally say that her value from a sexual marketplace perspective and her reproductive fertility value declines significantly. The same thing applies for a man. Although we do not have the same or the fixed quantity of sperm produced from 18, we certainly have the same approach of faith, or fate, not faith, fate as women. As we age, the quality of our sperm starts to decline. Unfortunately, that gate does not come down as quickly. Now, we might shoot blanks, but a man can still reproduce at 70 if he pairs with a younger woman. The point being that there's a double standard. There's an unfairness to nature between both sexes. As a woman, you have to understand this double standard and don't try to fight nature. As a man, you have to understand the benefits, but don't wait too late. Now, we put to the side those two value approaches, SMV, RFV. We come to the NSMV, the non-sexual marketplace value. I use a concept, I say, we all have an A, B, C, D up to Z of our self-image. And as we go through the list of A to Z, you find actually that plays a part in one of the many ways of valuing a person from a sexual marketplace perspective. A, appearance, and your attitude. Appearance is your sexual marketplace value. The other A, attitude, is your non-sexual marketplace value. B is your beauty and your behavior. Beauty, sexual marketplace value. Behavior, non-sexual marketplace value. Now this brings me to the concept of narratives and numbers. Can you see? Now I'm talking about the narrative. We then go into the person's character, integrity, value system. We go into the person's philosophy about life, decorum, femininity if it's a woman, masculinity if it's a man, hard work, honesty, gratitude. We go through things such as servant spirit, protective spirit, ability to provide. These are non-sexual marketplace initial characteristics. We're looking at things about you, that part of your character trait. A woman can be beautiful, but if she has a foul mouth, if she has the mouth of a sailor, then she becomes unattractive on a non-sexual marketplace perspective. but very attractive on a sexual marketplace perspective. So what you find is actually some of the attributes that we all share determine our non-sexual marketplace value. If you're raised from a good family, with an intact two-parent family, you have advantages because you've observed, assuming the roles were played, you have observed the loving nature of a mother and the protective, kind nature of a father, and therefore you have a model. You've had the opportunity to see and model behaviors, and therefore you will become, and you should become, all things remaining equal, if you have not been polluted by the womanist feminist movement and the women's movement, your ability to pair bond with someone peacefully is much higher than someone who was raised in a single parent family with no father, therefore not understanding how to express themselves to a man, not expressing or building the relationship with a man, and therefore will go through life in trial and errors and could make mistakes. Your non-sexual marketplace value is important. Why? Because as men move from the dating marketplace to the relationship marketplace, and I'm going to use to make things equal, assume the man does not want to have kids. Your reproductive fertility value does not matter to him because he doesn't want to have his seeds come to the next life. He doesn't care. Or maybe he's not able to do so. So your reproductive fertility value does not really matter. But your sexual marketplace value, your beauty, attractiveness will matter. Your shape, your size will matter. Your weight will matter. But he then pairs that with your non-sexual marketplace value. Why? He's playing the long game. He's looking for someone to go through the jungle with as an adventure. And he cares as much for your attractiveness, but he also recognizes that he doesn't want to be sleeping with the enemy every day. Men do not marry women who turn them on, generally speaking. Sorry, let me rephrase that. My apologies. Men generally marry women who turn them on, which is why their relationships fail. Wise men, discerning men, men of good judgment, recognize that there has to be an inverse to that process. They look for women who turns them on, but more importantly, they look for women who do not turn them off. If you turn me on and we spend the next 6 hours fighting, then life becomes a chore. Men want peace. So they combine someone they find attractive, but also someone who they can pair bond with and they can coexist with peacefully. We want peace, we want serenity, we want cooperation, and actually we want tranquility in our lives. The world is bad enough as it is. We do not want to come back to our nest and have to contend and handle you, the woman. We don't want that. So what you find is for men who want long-term relationships, they place much more emphasis because we understand my looks will fade, your looks will fade. It's not guaranteed to be there forever. But a woman with a kind heart, a forgiving spirit, a lovely attitude, great communication skills, a man with a forgiving spirit, great attitude, kind words, humorous, perhaps even grateful about life, is someone you can pair bond with for a long time. Now what you find is the three concepts: sexual marketplace value, reproductive fertility value, non-sexual marketplace value, is used differently by different men. The last is what I call your economic intrinsic value. This is where we go into challenges. Your economic intrinsic value is usually based on several things, one of which has to do with your education, your intelligence, and your ability to create opportunities in the world and solve problems for the people for which you're compensated for. The higher compensated, the more, in many ways, your economic value increases. Your education is a proxy for what it could be, but potentially is wasted every single day. We only measure based on actuality. So we go based on what has been realized, not accrued, but realized. So we look at things such as if you've come from a wealthy family, your economic intrinsic value is much higher because by default you have access to that wealth. If you've worked hard and studied hard and labored hard, even if you haven't gone to formal education, but you've labored hard, then you have compensation for all the work you've done. In many cases, hard work alone does not guarantee success. Some of the hardest working people are the lowest paid. Smart work. The law of compensation comes into this picture. It simply states that you'll be compensated based on 3 criteria. Number 1, the need for what you do, your ability to do it properly, and the level of difficulty there will be in replacing you. Law and demand, supply and demand comes into the picture in this instance. In any case, your economic intrinsic value simply says that you've taken all of you, your presence, your knowledge, your history, your learnings, your sacrifices, and you can exchange all of that into a tangible form. Narratives converted to numbers. And you're worth every year £100,000 based on a salary, and you have a net worth of, say, X. You can inherit the money, you can be born into wealth, or you can create your own wealth. Men are resource objects and success objects. A man is judged primarily from a primitive perspective on his ability to provide and protect. The ability to protect is a proxy, or rather, provision is a proxy for the ability to protect. I started today's session and I said that we've solved the problem of safety. What that simply means is that gone are the days when a woman had to be walked back home by her father from the bus stop, or waited on by her father, knowing she would arrive at a particular time at a particular bus stop. We have the police. We're civilized people. But we still provide protection by making sure that we have enough funds to afford a house, a place where there is some safety, some level of safety. We have locks on the door, we have CCTV cameras, we have access control systems, we have alarm systems. All of that is to provide some form of protection and safety to the lady. So provision therefore becomes the most important part, which connects to his economic intrinsic value, whether that is earned income or whether that is wealth that is liquidated to meet the expenses that he or she may have. From a man's perspective, because we are resource objects, as determined by women, we lead, rather than with our sexual marketplace value, or our non-sexual marketplace value, or our reproductive fertility value, we tend to lead with our economic intrinsic value. And women accept that we're overcompensating. So a man can be unattractive, much older, have terrible manners, table manners, bedside manners, social manners, but can be very wealthy. And women, generally speaking, will simply say, do you know what? I will overlook his inadequacies and his low ranking in all those areas because he's very, very wealthy. Women choose that. Men adapt to the rules set by women. Men, on the other hand, do not care about a woman's economic intrinsic value. A man is not asking what you do, how much you earn. Let me rephrase. I made a mistake. Men worth a dime. Men of a certain social hierarchy, social status. Men who understand themselves. Men who have come to their masculinity, wearing a male frame. Men who've actually gone through life. Men with good judgment and wisdom do not care about a woman's ability to create wealth. It could be a bonus to her, but because we do not control, we do not manage, we do not delegate said wealth, we do not care about it, we only care about the wealth we create. So most men do not look at a woman's education and career and find that attractive. I have never met a man who simply said, I met this woman, she's a doctor, I met this woman, she's an accountant, I met that woman, she's a surgeon, I met that woman, she's a political scientist, I met that woman, she's an MP, and I have I can't help myself but pitch a tent because she has a great job. No, men generally simply say, I'd like you to meet someone, she's very attractive, she's beautiful, she's stunning. I'd like you to meet someone, she's young, she's pretty, she's beautiful, she's gorgeous. So what you find is a fascinating perspective. Men are simply neglecting one aspect of the hierarchical approach and focusing on 3. And if the man is only looking for dating and not looking for long-term relationships, he discards the other 3. He only focuses on your sexual marketplace value. Does he find you attractive? And if he does, that's all he needs. Why? He's playing a short game. Now when he transcends, and it's a mistake he makes, when he chooses to move from the dating to the relationship, what he would normally do is bring in the other aspects, the reproductive fertility value, and which comes in as a proxy, age, and importantly, your non-sexual marketplace value, behavior, character, decorum, servant spirit, servant nature, someone who is not ideological in their perspectives about relationships, and therefore someone who can be with him. Women, on the other hand, tend to lead with economic intrinsic value, and they would choose other parts such as sexual marketplace value and non-sexual marketplace value, and sometimes even reproductive fertility value. But women choose in a similar manner, not the same, but similar manner. So they're choosing what they want. It's like building a bridge. You're building what you want. But generally speaking, women are ranked. Firstly, men are ranked, firstly, generally speaking, by what women hear, based on what a man is and what he does. Now, here is the key part. When a man meets a woman, he listens to her ego needs, and he creates in his mind whatever he believes will be the right strategy to appease her ego. And he feeds you that. And women, generally speaking, because they're in the sexual marketplace and making their selection alone, unsupervised, no support system, they fall for what I call the game. If it's a short-term opportunist, being the man, he will say anything and everything to win over your heart. Now, women generally are gatekeepers to their bodies, their emotions, and their womb. Men are gatekeepers to what we call the institution of union. We invite you to either accept or decline an invitation to be our wives or to join us in union. So two separate gatekeeping systems. The man will say anything to win over your heart and get access to your body, sometimes even your womb. Woman, therefore, actually is judging a man based on different criteria, but also has to approach it very differently. A man, on the other hand, we choose. So we can date you for 10 years and not propose to you. We can date you for 5 years and actually not even make an effort to talk about the future. Why? We're getting access to your body, your emotion, your support system, but we have no intentions of actually going on one knee or two knees or no knees and proposing a union with you. We are simply enjoying the opportunity that you provide by your presence. We're liberated in the West. Now, back in the day, in a traditional approach, you have a woman and her loved ones, family, friends, community, vetting the men who are coming to court her and saying, no, he's not a good person. He doesn't come from a good family. His intentions are not pure. We know him from the gym. We know him from the local market. Stay away from him. Because we're now free. What we have here is what I call a war. And all is always fair in love and war, by any means necessary. So men will lie about who they are in order to go past the first phase, which is your body, then your emotions, and then your womb. And women have to understand how to vet those men and what criteria is important to use. Now, if it's just short-term dating, just have fun. Sexual marketplace value used by both parties. Enjoy yourself. If you're looking for something more substantial, my view starts to change. I think from a female's perspective, character should be the first thing she uses to choose a man. From a man's perspective, he has to understand that she may be the most attractive, but if she has bad character, then there's a big problem. So character should always be, for both parties, the most important initial step in saying, I will consider you or I will consider you. The reason being, the motivations, the desires, the outcomes are different if you are in the sexual marketplace value looking for relationships compared to if you are in the sexual marketplace value looking for an exciting time or a good time. Now, this brings me to the concept of value exchange, which is where I close. The concept of what you bring to the table is a French concept dating back, I think, to the 14th century or the 13th century. And the concept was, if you were playing a game and one person was down, you inverted the table to assure that everyone was equal then. We coined the concept, what do you bring to the table, from early days. In other words, what is the value exchange? What are you bringing to the table? So a man who has a ranking, say an 8 or a 9, from an economic perspective, says, when I have money, I have resources, I have wealth, I have success. I would find a woman who has beauty, youth, fertility. sexual marketplace value, reproductive fertility value, and I want a girl who is a great girl, kind, easy to get along. Non-sexual marketplace value is then ticked, is looking for an exchange. The woman, on the other hand, simply says, I have beauty, I have youth, I have fertility, and I'm a great girl. I want a man who is equally just as young as I am, just as fertile as I am, kind and forgiving, but also can provide and protect for me. So she says, this is what I want. Both parties come to the table, and we then bring a concept called assortative mating or dating. Assortative mating or dating simply means people generally date within their class, within their group, within their ranking, within their level. A man on a sexual marketplace value, picking a woman on a sexual marketplace value, and if she picks on a sexual marketplace value, we always want what we do not have. But if he's a 6 in attraction level and she's a 6, then it's a fair deal. A woman, on the other hand, who is a 9 and a man who is actually, say, a 4 is an unfair deal, except he can compensate with other things. Now, can you see how all of the concepts come together nicely? You can increase your value. Not all and not in all areas. You can enhance your value. Not in all areas, but in some areas. There are several ways that a man can begin. After all, when we start at 18, we only have potential. The ability to provide and protect is limited. We have to grow into our manhood, and then over time, we can provide and we can protect. As a man ages, he has more of what women want. Sad reality, a double standard. But as over time, men acquire more of what women generally want. And as a woman ages, she has less of what men generally want. Beauty, youth, fertility. Now, I'm talking about to the marketplace. Now, recognize that the marketplace, you're just an individual, just a number. There's no emotion to this. The same way I can look at when I was 18 and I had nothing. Well, I never took it personal when someone said you're broke and you're poor. I was raised poor. Financially, we had nothing. Economically, we were poor. But I had a great father, a great mother. Character-wise, I would have scored them, at the pinnacle of character. Love, empathy, forgiveness. And I was given tools to then go into the marketplace and understand how to exchange my traits through hard work and sacrifice and diligence, dedication and grit, and solve a problem for other people and get compensation for that. So it's important to understand you always are doing a value exchange. You can enhance your value, you can decrease your value by decisions you make. And I'll talk about this in the sessions to follow. How men throw their values away and how women throw their values away. And how what we've found is that ideology can infiltrate your system, and therefore you throw what is important to you away. Time, the most important resource you have, and which is simply why you find a woman gets to 35 and 40 and then she realizes she made all the wrong choices because she assumed that she was a man, and she assumed that nature didn't play a dirty hand. She just assumed that the men who were always available at 18 and 20 will always be available at 40. It doesn't work that way. Similarly, a man who is 18, who realizes where he has good looks and he's attractive and he's charismatic and he's learned the game and he can lure women into bed, doesn't become something of himself. And so, unfortunately, when he gets to 40, he realizes he's a loser. You can decrease your value by your choices. You can enhance your value by your choices. Now, I hope today's session has been useful. And let me encourage you to do something for me. I've said so much today, some of which perhaps you do not agree with. That's fine. We can disagree without being disagreeable. Leave a comment, like, dislike, and if you haven't, to subscribe.